in neuroscience. And I believe that basically thinking about deep learning is a great way of better understanding brains, and thinking about brains is a great way of better understanding deep learning, because ultimately human beings are the only species that we know to be like truly deeply intelligent. And we don't know if AI currently is intelligent. So let's jump right in. No, modeling attention. I should say, like with all my papers, I'm an old professor. I look like I'm young, but I'm not young. I'm very old. And everything that you'll see was done by other people, mostly Said Salehi here. So let me first talk about what I did my PhD thesis in. So when I did my PhD thesis about 25 years ago, people were thinking a lot about the so-called binding problem. Let me talk about the binding problem. Imagine you see a scene like that, where you see this old lady and you see a cat. That in such a situation, there's going to be millions of nerve cells that are active in relation to the woman, and millions of nerve cells that are active, if you want, in relation to the cat. But if we put everything together, we will be mixing things. Now, like, how do we know which things which neural activities relate to the cat and which activities relate to the lady? And out of that comes the idea of binding. There must be a mechanism that kind of says, here's the lady, and here's the cat, and here's the lady, and here's the cat. And out of this came what was called binding by synchrony, with the idea that all the neurons that are that encode the lady, they will be active at the same time, and all the neurons that encode the cats will also be active at the same time, and then it maybe alternates between them. Now, that was the idea that was the basis of my PhD thesis. My thesis proposal said I'm going to show that that's how the brain does it, and I completely failed. I didn't succeed at it at all. I did lots of other things, but I didn't show how the brain solves the binding problem. Now, why do we want the binding problem to be solved? Now, like, we clearly can do these things in our mind, where I'm like, okay, look, you see this photo here, focus on the cat. And it's like when you and me do it, it's like our attention is on the cat, and it's like the rest of the world kind of goes away. It's not that it's really gone, but it's like it's like the cat fills our mind when we focus on the cat. And same thing, if we focus on the lady, she will be filling our mind, and the cat will kind of be outside of what we even focus on. And the reason why that matters so much is you can't see my office, but it's full of stuff. No, and because we live in a world that is full of stuff, it's great if we can kind of select out of this world, like one little thing. Now, during my PhD thesis already, again, a very long period of time, I started thinking about the real world. So what we did back then is it was called CAD CAM. So we put like, back then it was still crazy difficult. It was basically a VCR recorder, like this big, a car battery, and a voltage transformer in my backpack. We had like a camera on the cat that was like, it was like this big. It's not like, it was like as big as a GoPro and ugly as hell. But basically, we could see what the cat would see. And basically, the cat would run through the forest, and we would run after the cat. And out of that came me thinking about, like, if we have models of how the brain works, these models, if they're good models, they need to work on the real world. If they only work for like trivial stimuli, then it's not like it's not a good model of how the brain works. Now, attention, as I told you, this ability to select something, I think is super important. Let me give you some examples of what we know what people have. We can do spatial attention. I'm going to be like, right here, there's going to be something. And what did you just saw? That was a dinosaur, a 3D printed dinosaur. But in any case, if I tell you where to expect something, you'll be like really good and fast to detect that thing. Spatial attention. There's pop-out attention. I show you lots of things that are like the same. And then there's something that is different. You're like, yep, I see it. You have no trouble. Like you have that red 3 among lots of blue circles, like boom, can do it immediately. You can do search. I can tell you, show me where the 9 is. And like, you'll be like, yep, that's the 9. We can do a lateral cueing where you look into the middle, it gives you an arrow, and then you tell me, you focus your attention from there, which tells you where to focus on, to the actual thing, which is the 3. Or you can have a mask where like stuff is in front of it and you can ignore the mask. Now, like think about like running through the forest while like looking for a tiger, and there's lots of like trees between you and the tiger. Okay. And of course, like we can do object recognition, we can do like all kinds of things. And now briefly, why is attention so useful? Now, like we have a fixed amount of neurons in our head. We have a fixed amount of stuff for computation and for memory. We want to focus on the things that matter, but also we want to be able to like have modularity. You know, you can say, I can simulate this world. And now that I've seen Luqman, I can be like, okay, can I imagine him sitting there? Like, yes. Do I need to like move his microphone there? No, like I can just put him there. I don't need all the rest of his scene there. And this ability to like focus on pieces, I think is like super important for how things work. In any case, neuroscience has done lots of, like this is all cognitive science. Like you put people into a room, like you give them stimuli, you check if they're faster or slower and all those things. Neuroscience has also done a lot of things. There's so-called attention invariant tuning, which is if you have a neuron in the brain and you attend the thing or don't attend the thing, it changes the activity of it, but it doesn't change what the neuron likes, the thing that the neuron encodes for. There's experiments on if there's no attention, activity goes down. There's experiments by Alzheimer. There's kind of all kinds of experiments. And ideally, we'd like a model that explains all those things and actually works in the real world. So what are the traditional way of doing that? Like humans build attention mechanisms. It usually is without learning, and it's usually a very narrow set of tasks. And most of that literature has been dead for 20 years. Very few people have been working on it. A wonderful exception, Tom Serra and his lab have been building very strong models of like lateral effects, also using deep learning. Here's, for example, Bruno Olshausen's routing circuit. The idea is we have attention, kind of attends on something, and then it kind of takes it out and makes everything be the same size. Now, this would be very complicated and no one knows how to build it. We are inspired a little bit by the UNet, which is a deep learning system often used for attention. An input image, 600 by 600 pixel coming in this case. And we kind of go and like as we go through our convolutional layers, we kind of become more and more global in our recognition. But if we only had those, then segmentation and selection would be very difficult. Now, like how would this thing tell these neurons what's there? So in the UNet, you have the signals that as they come bottom up, and they jump back to the level that has the same spatial resolution as it. And the inspiration comes a little bit from the nervous system, where you say you have brain areas like V1. Here's where the information from the retina comes in. It's a crazy complicated graph, but the key is that it kind of goes to multiple layers, like V1, V2, V4, and so on and so forth as a brain. But if you zoom into it and you have a connection going forward from one layer to the next, you always also have a connection going back. It's like streets. It's not one way. You can always go forward and you can go back. And so we built a neural network that is a little like that. We have an input, goes to conv layer, ReLU layer, max pool layer, goes to the next layer. Conv ReLU, max pool goes to the next layer, and so on and so forth. But we also have connections going backwards, and we have recurrent connections between the two, between them. So we basically, everywhere where we are, we have a stream going backwards and we have a stream going forward. And attention will come out of the interaction between those. And attention, we will not build it into the system, but we will train the system so that it has attention. We then have a loss function that we'll be optimizing for. Now, like this is like we're now like in traditional deep learning land. We define a loss function. We're gonna give lots of images. We're gonna tell what it means to do good segmentation, good attention here, and then we will be doing gradient descent on that. So we have a first term that says, well, we want our model to be able to recognize things, and we want our model to be able to reconstruct things, and we want the model ultimately to be able to tell me which pixels are part from an object, and we want it to be able to tell us like where which features are part of an object. So all those things. Here's like the architecture in a little more detail than we had before. It's the same network for all tasks. Now, here's one important thing. We give it which task it is. Like, we're going to tell it this is a spatial attention task. We're going to tell it this is a search task. And for search tasks, we need to give it a prompt. It's a search task and look for the zebra. It's a search task and look for the bird. That's the architecture that we have here. Now, you can see at that level, we have the recurrent layers at the top. You could have recurrent layers at all places. It wouldn't make much of a difference. Okay, so here's what we have. Object recognition task. Like here we have like, do you see there's an 8 hidden below it? And so we have a first data set that we use. Now we will use 2 data sets. We're going to use a data set of images, MNIST, based on MNIST. And we will use another data set of like natural scenes. COCO, it's a famous like natural scenes data set. And so here you can see kind of an 8 behind it. You have like this mask floating in front of it. It's kind of meant a little to be like the trees that are in front of the tiger or something. And then in the end, the network has to say 8. And the way it's trained is exactly with this task. This is the input. It has to say this is an 8, and then when the system runs, it has these so-called attention maps. These are kind of the parts of the images that it really cares about, the parts of the image that have a strong influence here. No, so this is object recognition. It can easily recognize that there's an 8. Not only can it easily do it, it basically does it near perfectly. So it does it despite the fact that there's all that stuff in front of it. Like it's a little bit like a captcha or something. It's still like basically perfect at classification. It's also basically perfect at knowing which pixels are useful for the task. That's what the attention measure means that we have here. Okay, let's get going. Spatial priming. Now, like in this case, a dot appears. The dot basically says, tell me what object is there afterwards. We have target label as 6. Now, like it needs to, at the end, tell us 6. If it tells us something else, it's doing the wrong thing. Target attention maps in the beginning, we wanted to attend the dot. And then in the end, we wanted to attend the 6 that appears where the dot was. And here you have the output attention maps. This is what the network does after training. Now, and again, does it perfect classification, perfect attention in this case. Is that very surprising? No, like it's like this is a very simple data set. We'd call it a toy data set in the field. No, like this is based on MNIST, and MNIST is a famous database of basically just numbers, 0 to 9. Okay, then we can say visual cueing, where you have a little arrow which kind of says attend this, and then it attends that. And so what's happening there? No, and all we want at the end, it needs to say 3. How does it do that? No, it first attends the error, and then it stops attending the error and starts attending the 3. Again, does it perfectly. Is that surprising? No, because it's an easy task. Pop-out task, like it looks at this, target labels 3. We don't tell it what it should attend to, but what it does, it basically focuses the attention on that one object that is different from all the rest and successfully answers 3 again, like basically essentially all the time. Now here, same thing, we have an input sequence, and this is top-down search. So in this case, it says, it gets told, this is a search task. So the task is one hot encoded says search, and the prompt is for number 7. And indeed, it finds what the 7 is. It's trained to produce the right target attention map, which is the 7 here. And indeed, after training, it goes from not seeing anything to seeing the correct 7. Again, classification near perfect, attention near perfect, as it should be. Bregman illusion. So Bregman illusion is something that the cognitive...
Professor Coding.
Yeah.
As I had a question on the previous slide.
Oh, please, yes.
Yes, the input sequence, should I think about it as a layer of these images, and these images for each and every particular sequence, the target sort of entity is labeled out, and the network needs to do attention, sorry,
Yeah.
classification on it.
Yeah, this is a little confusing what we have. So let's go through the pieces. So the input sequence here is like the image that goes into the neural network. The input prompt is kind of what goes in from the top that kind of says, look for that. The target attention map is kind of like, it's weird that it's on the same slide. The target attention map is the kind of thing that goes into the loss function. So after the neural network produces a mask like this, and basically the difference between what the neural network says and what the target attention map does, that is part of the loss function. So basically, if these two would be different, then the gradient of that would be used to improve the neural network. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Makes
And
sense.
no, and so basically, if this is gray, it means that at the first time step, we don't give it any rewards because we
Okay.
want to give it time to figure out what it wants to attend to. And then at the second time step, we then say, okay, if you'd be wrong at that point of time, we'd kind of be re-optimizing the network so that it's less wrong at that point of time.
Okay, sure.
Okay, cool. So this is the famous Bregman illusion. It's actually like really, really interesting. So if you see a stimulus like that, like you can totally see the 7. But the fact that you can see the 7 is like very much easier because it has these brown things on top of it where you see what's on top of the 7. So if you remove that, the system is much, much worse. And that's like what's called Bregman illusion. And there's 4 versions of that. Object under moving occlusion, which means the stuff on top like is moving. Static occlusion, it's always the same. Object under a moving blank, so you don't see. Now here you see in brown the stuff that's on top of it. It's like if there's like coffee over a paper. In if it moves, it's easier because then kind of you can like ignore the stuff that moves on top of it. Static occlusion is harder. If you don't see what the mask is, it's again harder for humans. And if it's not moving and not visible, then it's like very, very hard. Now, like here, you don't even see the 7, and the system also doesn't. And like you can compare like humans there with it. And look, in this case, just like humans, it's like really good because it learns to ignore that. Here it is like, and that's why the recurrent neural network is so good. Like the recurrent neural network can kind of like hold in memory what it saw in the past. Static occlusion is worse. Moving blank was static blank, very, very bad. So it basically, the neural network behaves in this sense very similar to what humans do. And then we have an object tracking task where it's like, we show it a stimulus, here the 6. Target attention map is we want it to attend the 6, and then the 6 will start moving. And it basically keeps following the 6 and like keeps attending it.
Professor Coding, about the previous slide, the Bregman illusion, is it to think about it as an evaluation metric for the results of classification, the network?
You could. I mean, like in a way, yes, that's what we optimize for. No? Like we're optimizing so that it's as good as possible. But it's also something that tells you something about how things work. Look, like it's using the fact that it sees the distractor that's over it. No, it sees the mask here. And it shows that like both humans, if you look at the human experiments and this here with the neural network, that they both benefit from knowing where the distractors lie, like where the mask lies.
Okay.
And the reason why it's useful, like is if we have something that say green versus blue on the background, and I know that I don't know something. It's better than if I know that I don't know something versus if it could be that I don't know it, but alternatively, it's like blue. Like kind of like it takes away the uncertainty on how to interpret the brown pixels, basically. That's why this helps here.
Okay.
No, and it's so it's basically, this is a test of to which level can a system use both like integrate things over time, but also use information on what is a mask. It's basically about making uncertainty visible.
Sure.
No, it basically says the stuff that's behind the brown pixels, we just don't know. And it's a big difference to know that you don't know it versus to like maybe it's what it's background, or maybe I just don't see it. It kind of like it's a fun statistical regularity there.
All right.
Cool. Object tracking here. Now, like we have the 6. It's now supposed to kind of both track it. You know, like this is the attention map that it should have. And it should also consistently say that this is a 6. And indeed, look, here we have a 6. Now we make it difficult by basically having like other things go through it. Look, here it's like actually quite difficult because we have like lots of things and it's like getting slightly worse there. And as soon as it like comes out, it's like really quite certain with what the pixels are again. Object tracking again, like, so now the key is here, no, like this is one circuit. It's not that we like train like 6 different neural networks. It's like one neural network that does all the tasks in the same architecture. Again, of course, this is it's very good at that. Why is it good? Again, like this is an easy task. Now, like these are like digits. This is MNIST. Like we know that we can build really good technical systems for it. No, and then we have a so-called inhibition of return task, which is like look at things one after the other. In this case, like it looks at the 5 and it looks at the 6 and it looks at the 4. And we have like some way of matching them. Again, does near perfectly. Hold on. What's going on here? Okay, cool. Now you can say so far, this is all artificial. Now, like, we train with the MNIST data set. The MNIST data set are all digits. I mean, like, it's good that it works with it, but it's not very surprising because it's not very, very hard. So for that, we now like train on real world data sets, COCO data set. By now we have like better results. I haven't like been able to put the new results into the slide deck yet. We do some things where we like, no, this is not from COCO, this is artificially made just because it makes for a good demo. Here you see a building with a giraffe in front of it. And why is attention going to be good? Basically, this background is going to be a distractor. In fact, there's neural networks are famous for like, if you put like a cow into the sky, it thinks that it's a bird. And if you put a cow into like a lake, it like thinks it's like a fish or a boat or something. Kind of like basically they are excessive influences of the context. In this case, in this case, of course, it does really well, and it basically selects all the pixels that are part of the giraffe, and it learns that very easily. We have a fun demo as well, like, okay, real world search. Not like, this is not like an actual photograph. This isn't constructed. We are like, show us the bird. So we say, bird is the input, and it says search task as a task input. And indeed, it like shows us the bird. And here's like all the pixels that are part of the bird. Those are the target attention maps. This is what it actually attends. Now, I want you to see it's not quite as clean as it could be. But the reason why it's not quite as clean is like these images are just not really good. They're like very difficult. It's also like we're trying to simultaneously do good computer science and do good neuroscience. And that often means that like basically will be like slightly worse than like state-of-the-art recognition systems. Okay, this was one example. Here's another like composite thing where we copied a few things together. We say bear, bear, bear. And again, like it's like really good at getting us the outputs of the bears. We can do real world spatial priming. We're like, look here, tell me what's there. And then it's like, oh yeah, look here, there's a bird. And again, it like figures out to properly mask the bird and recognize the bird. Now, this is just to kind of say, we now have a model that like describes human behavior in lots of situations, and it it makes similar mistakes, not like the Bradman illusion, like it makes mistakes under similar conditions, but it also can, the same model can like work in real world data, which I think is very important. Now, let's think about where this could be useful. Now, like I mentioned already, attention should be useful for memory. We want to like put objects of interest into memory, not scenes. But it can also be useful for other things. For example, neural networks tend to like focus very much on the context. Now, like if you put something into the sky, it will be like, okay, like it's a bird, like regardless. Like if I throw like a cat into the sky, it's still gonna think it's a bird, because the internet has very few images of cats in the sky. And that's why kind of like it kind of doesn't understand that it should be focusing. So let's see if it can do us something good here. So here's something that I didn't know before, which is there is a data set on celebrities. It's kind of like modern Hollywood celebrities. It has women, a lot more than men. Like, look, the world is unfair. And it has black-haired women, and it has blonde women. And it has black-haired men, and it has blonde men. What I hadn't realized is among celebrities, there's no blonde men. Look at this here, like 2% of all celebrities are blonde men. 36% of all celebrities are blonde women. So it's kind of like, it's just something where like, basically if you're a celebrity and blonde, you're like almost certainly a woman. Now, why might we expect that there is that neural networks could help? Oh, I'm sorry. I think the right-hand side is the test set, but like you see, they're very similar. A neural network, if it's trained to do gender recognition, would know that basically here is a distraction. A neural network that doesn't have attention will like focus on their hair and be like, oh, look, blonde, must be female. No, so we might expect in this case that neural networks that have attention would do better than others. So what we have is we have an input sequence and we have the attention map for the gender recognition task. After the network does it, it basically sees it like this. Now it's kind of like your hair shouldn't tell me if you're male or female. Your hair should just tell me what hair you have. And so you can then go through this diagram. So let's maybe step. So like this is if you want like the first case where we show that for a pure pattern recognition problem, it helps. So this is like from a computer science perspective, it's better than without attention. So if we look at all classes, we see that with attention, we're better at gender recognition than without attention. Why? Because we can kind of, the system learns to focus on the things that matter. For female blondes, no difference, almost no difference. For female black-haired, almost no difference. For male blondes, massive difference. Why is that? Because without attention, the system is like blonde, therefore female. And it's like, no, it's not. It's like you're picking up on the wrong features. It's not reality. And same thing, like, and then you have an effect on black-haired males as well. No, like because we train on both at the same time, the existence of these in the training set kind of means that now it also makes mistakes for men. In any case, attention like totally helps. And what does it do? Basically, without attention, it focuses on the hair first and then maybe a little of the rest. Look, it also focuses on the background. There's probably something that would, like men are like more often photographed in front of a black background or something. So whereas with attention, it kind of systematically like focuses on the right things. Now let's look at some ethos, electrophysiology, some neuroscience. Here we see, so basically what people ask here is if I have the neural response to something, early visual cortex, and like something is like bars with different orientations and things like that. And then they ask, how much does attention change the activity? Like if we attend something, does it become more active or less active? Amplitude modulation is basically how much bigger or smaller does it get? And indeed, on average, attention makes it go up on average in that score, like about 0.5. And now you can say for our model does the same thing a little less. But basically, the neurons of objects that we attend are more active. And then you can say, does it get more precise? No, it doesn't in the brain. I mean, some neurons become a little more precise. Some of them become a little less precise. Same thing in our neural networks. Some neurons become less precise. Some of them become more precise. Then you can say, does it become more active? Well, on average, not. Some neurons become more active. Some of them become less active. And in our neural network as well, some neurons become more active. Some of them become less active. Then you can ask, does it change what the neurons encode? And it doesn't change in the real brain, and it doesn't change in our model as well. So like there's a whole bunch of like neuroscience findings that are pretty well replicated by our model. Now here's a famous study by Rolf Zimmer. He was looking for the binding by synchrony hypothesis that my PhD thesis was about, and in his paper he never talks about it because he didn't find it. So the way it works is the monkey has to fixate a point in the middle of the screen, and then there's going to be a line on the screen, and the line is connected to a dot at the end, and the monkey has to move the eyes to the place, to the end of the line that's connected to it. And there's two versions, either the left one is connected or the right one is connected. And we're looking at a neuron that basically cares about like the local property close to here. So in this case, it sees things that should be attended. No, the monkey needs to look at this to succeed at it. Here, the monkey needs to look at the other one to succeed at it. So the difference between these two stimuli is basically how much attention there should be on it. And what he finds is that there's an early time where there's no difference, and a late time where basically the neuron on the object that's attended is more active. That's what we have. Like here, green stimulus 1 versus stimulus 2, where there's less activity. So it's a little later. And here you can see the same or a version of that same experiment. In our case, you see target attention maps, output attention maps, and it like learns over time to basically look for the line that's connected and ignore the line that is not connected. And that also means that there's more activity in the relevant area. Now, like, I want you to see this, not like that you also know the weaknesses of the model. Not like in the real brain, there's this burst. I show you something new. That's like the whole brain goes like, wow, there's something new. And then only this attention thing is like a minor thing that happens at the end. In our neural network, it's like a really big difference. And happens at like and like our time. Now, like our time is not calibrated against real brains. Now, like what is it like in our neural network? There's like time steps. There's not like something like milliseconds. So kind of like the comparison here is a little more complicated. So that brings me to my summary already. I think attention is a really important part of multitask behavior. Now, like in the real world, we're like overwhelmed with lots of things, and we need to use the same visual systems for lots of tasks. There are tasks where we want to detect things. There's parts where we want to commit objects to memory. There are tasks where we want to reason about visual objects. Now, what would happen if I did the following things? Traditionally, a neural network just does one thing, which is like I go through the layers and it tells me, is there a bird or is there like a cow or something? We want neural networks to do more than that for us. If you want, like it's an additional primitive to have attention. It's very attractive from the flow of information because everything can remain local. We can construct these models of attention through gradient descent. I think like basically when I did my PhD, the reason why I couldn't build this, I wanted to build this model during my PhD, but I had no idea how to get there. The reason is back then we weren't training the models. We were like building it by hand. And building things is very, very difficult. Whereas basically training networks to do the things you want is much more effective. It replicates a whole host of cognitive behaviors. And I think it also like moves computational neuroscience kind of into the real world. You know, like it's traditionally computational neuroscience models only deal with like one thing that maybe the monkey does in the lab. What we want is models that like really work in the real world and can solve real problems. And I think it explains some properties of the world. And of brains. And I think it's an example of how we are going towards a deep learning powered domain of computational neuroscience. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm very much looking forward to be discussing with you.
Thank you, Professor Coding, for this wonderful talk. My first question is, members feel free to ask questions. Mine is about the attention. We know it in the transformers that these guys from Vaswa and the Google research team, they stipulated how attention would be like you pass through this entity through a softmax and then get those matrices KV over what. And then somewhere there is a paper about visual attention. I haven't read that paper, surprisingly, but I've seen it like about visual attention.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, what could be the correlation between the attention that has been you have worked on and the attention that we know it? Because now when you tell people about attention, what comes to their mind, I think, would be the Vaswan and others' work.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a wonderful question. So the two things that are called attention are like very different. So there's attention in transformer networks, and you all heard about it. And there's attention towards objects. That's what my talk was just about. Let's talk about how they're different. So if you look at a neural network with transformers, what is attention? Attention is basically the ability of the system to model interactions where you can say every token can kind of like through the attention mechanism interact with every other token. We call that attention because the system selects which things interact strongly and which things interact more weakly. What we have in the thing that I have here is attention does a very different thing. So attention basically says, all that stuff that's not part of it, let me make it go away. Now, in a way, a vision transformer model, like some of the best vision models that we have at the moment, they use an attention layer as part of their transformers. They will do a little bit like what I did here. No, like they kind of like basically learn that like if these two things are really very different colors, then probably they shouldn't interact much with one another. So in principle, it can do a little bit of that. But what it can't do is like really home in on what an object is. So basically, if I look at you, what do I know? Like there's like million pixels part of you, and not only the pixels, but there's kind of like how you look and what your character is and what our discussion is, kind of like there's all those things. And I can basically home in on it and like cut away the rest. And like cutting away the rest is like very hard on like pairs of data. Like you can say, if you give me two pieces of your shot or something, well, they're both white and like there's some background. There's also white because there's like bright light behind you. The transformer model kind of doesn't have a way of kind of saying, oh, no, look here. Once I realize this is like where his shot is, like now these two white things shouldn't interact with anyone. Or like basically like your shot has nothing to do with the background. They're both white, but for completely different reasons. And in kind of like the object-based attention, it like iterates, it like does recursion until it figures out what's part of the object and what's not part of the object. So it basically, the big difference is in the object-based attention, it has kind of a concrete meaning, which is this is part of it and this is not part of it. Now, if you want, once we do that, it's almost like we still want to use a transformer model, but a transformer model only operating within the object, within the person, if you want. Or like if I have like, if I could know like, okay, this is you, then I can say like, well, now I still want to like say, I want to recognize your face. I still want to like allow all kinds of things to interact with one another. But by basically being able to say this is part of the object and this is not part of the object, you can cut away on things. And that gives you multiple benefits. And the first one is you don't allow for interactions between things that just have nothing to do with one another. Like And it's a very hard learning problem for a transformer model to do that. And it's like in the object attention model, it's like very natural. But the other one is also you can now like avoid wasting compute. Now you could say, if I tokenize all pixels that are in an image, it's a lot of images, it's a lot of tokens. I need to allow every token to interact with every other token. So that's n squared as basically compute cost.
Yeah.
But if I could select only those tokens that are part of view right now, like I'm in a big world here, and like of all tokens that I'd have, like you cover like what do you know, like 1%, 0.1% of my visual field. So therefore, like basically I'd need to like have a dramatically smaller number of token interactions. Once I can use object-based recognition to kind of say, well, like, look, I don't need an interaction between like you on my screen and like the background and the rest of my office. No, like I just need the things that are on my screen. So like it promises to like both computationally be helpful, and there's probably an exponential speed up, exponential gain in like sample complexity, but also it could be faster, it could be less compute, but it could also probably be like less risk of like being wrong about things, simply because like if I give the system lots and lots of extra parameters that are about interactions between tokens that are irrelevant right now, then that will add noise to my classifications, and therefore I will be wrong more often. So like it really like object-based attention is really complementary to what we think of as attention in transformer models. Sorry for the long comparison.
Yeah, I think it was worth it. My thinking is now, can we have some sort of mathematical visualization or representation of this attention, if it is possible? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, like you can, for example, say what the system does at every layer of the system. It basically selects which neurons matter. It selects which neurons are like relevant and which ones are not. At the bottom layer, that is like in an image. And that's the visualization that we did. You know, like we show you the attention maps. Those are like the pieces of the world that it considers are relevant. But as we go towards higher, more abstract layers, you know, like there's layers that deal with color and probably layers that deal with meaning. You could build a visualization where basically at every layer you can like select only those things that are part of that representation. And that disentangling then also allows you to kind of like commit that to memory, where I can say, I want like a Lookman representation in my long-term memory, and I don't want it like mixed in with like a billion other tokens. I kind of want to like have you here so I can imagine talking with you or something. And for that, yes, you can like do a visualization, but you can also just use it like as like a gateway to memory.
Yeah, sure. I don't know whether other members have questions.
Yes.
Um, okay, yes,
Yeah,
Dixon.
thank you. Thank you, Professor Conrad, for the wonderful presentation you've delivered right now. My background is in statistics, and currently I'm working on a PhD in biostatistics, drug development. I have a question regarding mathematical concepts as well. I'm looking at a statistical look. We use the sample to estimate for the population. So in this very context, what are the statistical methods employed to assess the model's ability to generalize from simple stimuli like digits to more complex real-world data like natural images?
Yes. No, let's be clear. The network, we have two different networks. Now we have a network trained on digits, and we have a different network trained on real world data. We could make the real world model also do the digits, but basically for the digits, we need far fewer parameters than for the real world stimuli. So that means that think like the digit model is something that you can train on a computer very quickly. You need a small number of samples because like basically the manifold of stimuli that you use is kind of pretty small. Whereas you can say the manifold of objects in the real world is like arbitrarily large. Like it's a really complicated world. So that's why we have two different models there. like you mentioned a little sample complexity here, if I get you right. Now, like it's really quite interesting that if you have n objects, like then you basically have n squared like extra token relationships, and therefore kind of like you will be much less sample efficient because you need basically far more data to describe the whole scene as you would need it to just describe an individual object. So I think that there's like a statistical benefit to that one can make very precise.
Okay.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that answered my question. I just want to have a follow-up question regarding the error rate in the model prediction. How is the uncertainty in its output quantified?
Oh, when it comes to LLMs, so what LLMs like the text you're referring to the text models. What LLMs do is they usually just produce a probability distribution over what the next token is.
Prof, I think he's asking about the errors, the rate of error.
Yes, rate of error.
The rate of error of LLMs regarding to what? I'm sorry.
Like the rate, the generalizability of the model in terms of errors. Like, is that, Dixon, what you're asking?
My question is, what is the error rate in the model prediction, and how is uncertainty in this output quantified?
But you're asking about it in LLMs, or are you asking about in the model that I presented?
In the model.
Oh, in the model that I presented. Okay, so the system, as we set it up, doesn't explicitly model its own uncertainty. Now, you can say, in an ideal world, I'd like the model to not just say this is a bird, but this is a bird, and I'm like 80% sure about it. This is a task that, no, like it does produce, no, we have a one hot encoding of the outputs. And so if you want, like after the softmax, we do have something that like roughly is like a probability distribution. But I want you all to know that these probability distributions are essentially never properly calibrated. So that means that like the probability distribution that it spits off is off in lots of ways. It's like the models that we have are like really good at like doing the most probable task, but like they don't tend to be calibrated. So if you take like all model outputs where the model assigned 20% probability to the probability that there's about, you will often find that like in reality, it's more like 10% in that case. So like so basically these systems don't tend to be calibrated. There exists ways of calibrating them. For example, you can like add extra variables that like explicitly represent the uncertainty about it. And you can like use them to basically enforce calibration. And it works, these approaches work pretty well.
Okay, thank you so much, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof, once again. I think unless there are other questions which I'm not seeing from members, we have approached the top of the hour, and we really want to thank Professor Conrad for giving us this opportunity. Professors are busy people, and agreeing to share your time with us and share this information and learning from you is really a great opportunity for us. So thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much indeed.
Delighted to get to know you. Have a good time, everyone.
Have a good time too. Bye-bye, everyone. And we meet in the next session next week. Bye-bye.